I'll look at you. I'll look at the monitor.
I am something to behold.
Right?
Right. Remember, don't go past like...
Don't go. Yeah, it was so funny. I remember last year we did this and they're like, oh yeah, no, that was a great recording. I'm like, oh, you recorded. Cool. It's kind of a happy little surprise. It's about... Ready to rock and roll?
You can use the clicker. I'll just make sure that the mouse stays on the forward. So just make sure you stay on the black button. Okay?
Stay on the black button.
I got you covered here.
Okay. Hey guys.
What's up, everyone?
Hope you're having a great week here. Oh my goodness. We just landed here yesterday and it's been amazing. And I'm so happy to be back out here with you guys. My name is Shelly.calhoun-jones. I'm a technologist. I work for a company called Cohesity. And Jed, would you like to do an introduction?
Yeah, I'm Jed Wallace. I'm a staff technologist at Cohesity. Got 20 years of IT experience as a practitioner, engineer, and whatever as other duties as applies on the job, you know, as that goes. So, and we're here to talk to you about how to fortify your virtual fortress. Shelly?
Yes. So that's really why we're here today. We wanted to spend some time getting to connect with the community and also just, you know, learn more about how you're using VMware and maybe some of the challenges that you're running into with vulnerability management. So that's what we're going to be covering in this quick talk. We're going to be taking a look at some of the challenges that a lot of companies are running into right now with keeping their infrastructure secure, because as we know, the threat landscape continues to evolve. And, you know, my background's in security. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. So real excited. We'll cover some challenges. We'll talk about some different strategies. And a little bit of story time, we're going to take a look at a test company that's running into challenges with their vulnerability management posture. And as always, if you have questions, we do encourage you to save them until after the session, but I have these really cool tokens that we'll be handing out. If you do have questions or feedback, we'd love to get that from you guys after this session. So let's go ahead and jump in, Jed. All right, challenges. So let's go ahead and take a look here at the threat landscape slide. So these are just some numbers that I pulled from stories that have been coming out, you know, over the last couple of months. You know, the threat landscape has been very active with ransomware. In particular, ransomware which is targeting VMware infrastructures. And so I picked a couple threat strains just from reports over the last couple of months. Ransom Hub, this is ransomware as a service. It targets VMware ESXi environments. And same with Plate Crypt. This is another threat which also uses double extortion tactics once it breaches the environment. Conti, this was originally found back in 2021, but we still see it floating around. And Eldorado's been out for a couple of months, and this has also been targeting VMware ESXi servers. Now, the common variables that we see across all of these different threat strains is that they are targeting VMware environments, they're targeting misconfigurations, and also weak passwords. So this is a really good opportunity for companies to take a look at their environment and see how you can kind of tighten down your security policies. And if a virtualized infrastructure does get compromised, it can get encrypted within a matter of minutes, which makes it even more prevalent than ever. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. All right, so, you know, some of the other ongoing challenges that a lot of our customers and, you know, customers out in the community are running into is just literally the sheer amount of data that you're getting in your environment. I used to work for Symantec, and a lot of the customers that I worked with, you know, my customers could be going through vast amounts of logs when dealing with an infection. So that's why things like automation is even more important than ever, because we need to have the ability to prioritize. Oh, it worked. Another thing that we've seen is shadow IT and bring your own devices. And this has been something that we've seen pretty much since COVID. You know, a lot of companies have been going remote. And so For that, employees are bringing their own devices. They could be finding creative solutions for solving problems they might not be able to solve with IT. So that's another common attack vector. And then, of course, insider threats, which may not actually be someone intending to be malicious. They just may need to be educated on proper security best practices. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jed.
So another thing to think about is compliance and regulatory requirements. These are things like HIPAA and Sarbanes-Oxley's, other things we have to abide by depending on what kind of institution you are, whether you're a bank, whether you're in healthcare. So this is another thing, this could be a potential hurdle or roadblock. Next. Now, resource constraints. What does that mean? Well, think about budgets. Not everybody has a multi-million-dollar budgets to implement security analysts, monitoring tools, threat detection, and things like that. So these are things that can kind of get in the way, as well as cybersecurity personnel, staff. These are other issues you might come into contact with. Now here is a virtual fortress scenario. So imagine you're a global manufacturing company and you are getting hit with a ransomware attack. The vulnerability, they hit one of the known vulnerabilities on your VMware environment. So the ransomware hits, it exploits a vulnerability in VMware vSphere, and then next, it encrypts all your VMDKs. Now your production is down, you're losing money, and your staff, you're at a standstill. Next. Next, we're going to get into, well, what can we do? How do we prevent this? And so Shelly's going to talk to you a little bit about vulnerability management strategies that we can try. Shelly?
Yeah, we're going to apply this to our test company. We're going to apply this to this manufacturing firm that we just looked at. Let's imagine that we're doing our postmortem. Let's imagine that we are looking for ways to kind of batten down the hatches. To do this, we can leverage resources like the NIST cybersecurity framework, which we're going to apply in this next section. We're going to take a look at how this company can better secure their environment using the NIST methodology. Now, one of the things I like about NIST is that this whole process is cyclical. The idea is that your security program is organic, it's ever evolving. And so we're going to walk through each of these stages, the identify, the protect, detect, respond, and recover, also making sure that we're hitting our governance goals. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Jed, if you want to take us through the identify phase.
Yeah, so sure. So here we're in the identify phase. So first, catalog assets. What do I mean by that? Know what's in your network, right? That's the first phase. We need to know what servers we have, what applications. So we're aware of what might have possible vulnerabilities, what could be a possible attack surface. Conduct a risk assessment. Do internal pen testing. Do vulnerability threat scans with Nessus or other tools that you might be able to leverage. Document vulnerabilities. This is also important. So moving forward, you want to document possible vulnerabilities and how you went and you dealt with those. Thanks.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that, Jed, is I remember us talking over the other day about this. Your background is working with government agencies.
Yeah, election security, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like really ever more important than ever just to make sure that you have your whole topology.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And what's interesting about this is that there's a lot of tools within the VMware space, like ARIA, which give you the ability to do this automatic inventorying, automatic cataloging. And you can build upon this during the protect phase. The idea is that we want to make sure we're implementing the right level of access for our users. I come from a security background, so I'm always thinking about the mindset of least privilege and using a defense in depth type approach. Also developing a patch management process. And it's funny because a lot of the companies that I've worked with, historically, an organization may only roll out critical patches or major patches, a couple times a year. But as we've seen with like Microsoft Patch Tuesday and other updates, sometimes you have to do that more frequently. So making sure that you develop a rigorous patch management process, standardizing your configuration policies, which you can do by using images and other tools, and then of course educating your employees, which is an ongoing battle at any company. So.
I think that's putting it mildly, but yeah.
All right, so Jed's going to walk you through the detect phase?
So here on the detect phase, implement continuous monitoring. Well, what is that? So that can be one of 100 tools to actively monitor your network infrastructure for possible threats. So I'd rather have 10 false positives in a day than have none, because at least something is monitoring for suspicious behavior in your network. And you can do this with ARIA. They have the built-in tools to do inventory and continuous monitoring as well. That might already be in your kit with your VMware license that you can already leverage. Manage your logs. Make sure you have a sys log server up and running. Again, I go back to ARIA, that tool set. A lot of VMware shops might already have these tools and products that they can already leverage, as opposed to go out and finding other tools and solutions to implement, and then all of a sudden you have too many software packages to manage, right? And so with managing logs, you want to make sure you have the retention you want to set. You want to make sure you have something that parses these logs in a very readable way.
Yeah, and that actually leads us into the response phase.
You want to swap?
Yep. Just making sure that you have a rigorous incident response plan. I remember when I worked for Amazon, they used to call it game day exercises. You know, the idea is when we're kids, we used to do fire drills in school. Well, the same applies with having a good incident response plan. Sometimes you need to do tabletop exercises. I know in the security community, they have breaches and backdoors, which give you the ability to go through kind of like a dress rehearsal with your security team. But not just that, but when you do run into an incident, you may notice that there are particular gaps that you need to go in and fill and improve. And so during the contain and mitigate phase, make sure that you document what you're doing, make sure that you're communicating to the appropriate stakeholders, so that way if you do run into this incident again, you are better prepared. Do you want to add any thoughts to that, Jed?
No, I think this kind of leads us into the recover phase, if you want to touch on that.
Oh yeah, it's a really good point. So obviously we don't want to have to recover workloads, but sometimes it does happen. You have to bring your workloads back online. And there's a lot of tools that you can leverage which can help you with your recovery strategy, just within the community itself. Also, I know VMware has tools that will help with recovery. But just going in, assessing the damage, doing a post-mortem, which is not always fun, but identifying lessons learned and better ways that we can fine-tune our security policies. It could even be pushing out a critical update to a group of servers. Do you want to add to that, Jed?
So that kind of leads me into this next slide, right? And so we use that scenario of a global manufacturing firm, right? Mm-hmm. So, well, what would have happened afterwards? And here, so the outcome. So the post-security incident, let me swap for you so I can see. It prompted a reassessment of the cybersecurity threat, their protocols, their backup strategies, and everything. So with that said, you can click one more time for me.
Yep. Oh, buddy.
This led us to some benefits. Perform a new risk assessment, created a new cyber recovery plan, implement new patching schedule. Very important. So in my past, when it comes to patching schedule, this is something that's not always thought about as much as it should be, right? So if you're lucky enough to have a development, a test, or a staging environment, as well as then you have your production, you're going to test your patches from development all the way through in production, but having the staggered time in between these different stages to see if it breaks anything before you roll out to production and you take down your entire network. So also implementing new user access controls and training. Training is, I know, hard and cumbersome, but it's something that's really necessary for us to do, because I feel like user training is the biggest gap we have when it comes to cybersecurity and dealing with some of these phishing attacks and ransomware events. And implementing monitoring and logging. Pick your monitoring solution, whether that's a product within ARIA or another, whether it's SolarWinds or whatever product you use, and maintain logs for a nice retention. So you have, if you do the post-mortem, you'll have those logs to refer back to, as well as install vulnerability scanner tools. You want to know ahead of time if there's some suspicious behavior in your network. So it's really important to have those tools in place to do real-time threat scanning. And also, you want to reduce your attack surface. And an easy way to do this is if you're a VMware shop and you're already leveraging NSX, you can do micro-segmentation. So only allow servers to talk to who they need to talk to. Whether that web server needs to talk to that SQL server, you need to lock that down. As well as, you don't have to have NSX. If you have to do VLANs, I know it can be cumbersome, then do it. If you want to do ACLs in your router, do it. You're trying to protect yourself the best way possible. And a lot of times you might not have that budget, and these are some of the existing tools you can leverage. I'm going to hand it over to Shelly to kind of close this out.
Yeah, so just a general call to action here, because I know we covered a lot of information over a short period of time. I would recommend just taking the time to go through and perform a thorough assessment of your topology, of your infrastructure, identify any vulnerabilities that you find. You'll notice that there's a QR code down at the bottom of the screen. If you do find a vulnerability that has not been reported, this will give you the information for reaching out to Broadcom for getting it reported with their security response team. Also work with your teams to ensure that critical updates and patches are getting updated in a timely manner. And collaborate and educate. That can be just literally connecting with your online community. Maybe even consider reaching out to your account team to see if there are any services that you can leverage that could help with performing this type of health check. But just, also engage your end users as well on, proper security best practices, because we're all learning in life. We're all students in life, and the same really does apply with technology.
Yeah, I didn't know a whole ton of a lot around security other than what I needed to implement, on my day-to-day as an engineer and an admin. When you implement new technologies, are always taking security into mind when you're implementing these things. And so you were kind of, it was always there, but it's more prevalent now than ever. It seems that security first, everything else later, right?
Yeah.
So, but out of curiosity, who out in the audience actually has a patch schedule? They use lower environments to actually test things before they break. And do you guys use this on do you use this in a staggered way? Do you leave a certain amount of time in between patching cycles? Well, we're handing these tokens out. If you can go to the front and actually get a T-shirt.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? So your question is, how do we protect memory? So what if there's a process running in memory?
That's always a tricky one. With security software, you want to have some type of security software running on the endpoint. I don't think you're going to be able to detect that from a VMware perspective. It would have to be some type of endpoint agent.
So there are tools out there that can scan your memory. So let me kind of narrow the scope to, let's say you want to protect Active Directory. So there's one tool out there that I used in the past that actually would go and it would look for processes running in memory, and as well as it would create dummy accounts to obfuscate Active Directory and things like that. Because as I think everybody knows, Active Directory is a huge attack vector for people out there. So having something that can obfuscate accounts, create dummy accounts, things like that I think is very useful. So There are tools out there that I've had have really good experience from. It was a product with Symantec, but I do believe it still exists, but I think it's been spun off into something else, but it was a really good tool.
Was it their honeypot detector where they would deploy?
There was also part of that product was a honeypot. So
that was really cool.
Yeah, it's really neat. So there are some really good tools out there if you do the research. So we go ahead.
Yes. Any other questions?
Thank you for your question. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure meeting with you guys here this week. If you do have any questions, any feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll be here after the session.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Much appreciated. Thank you.